Madam Web. Madam fucking Web. So Sony's Madam Web was released on Valentine's Day, and this movie has been getting a lot of hate, and rightfully so, but I watched it, and here's my 2 cents on the movie. But of course, before I start talking about this movie, let me get into the history of Sony and their handling of these Spider-Man-less Spider-Man spin-offs, because context matters. So, of course, you have the 2 Venom movies, Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage. They're not great films, but they do have an audience, and I liked them. I like Let There Be Carnage more than the first film, but generally speaking, they're just objectively not great films. And then there's Morbius, less said the better. Kraven the Hunter was supposed to come out last year, but it got pushed back to this year, and more specifically pushed back to later on this year. But Madam Web is here, but in general, I'm just not a fan of Sony. They have the rights to Spider-Man and all the characters in the Spider-Man universe. And so I just feel like Sony's just doing this for the wrong reasons. They just making these movies solely for money and not because they have an actual competent story to tell. And we've seen that over again with these movies. And now that Madam Web is out, it is even more apparent that Sony really just needs to stop. But how do I feel about Madam Web? Well, I think it's better than Morbius, and that's the best compliment I can give this film. Like this movie is not one of the worst movies ever made. Let me just say that. Everybody's saying this is worse than Morbius. I respectfully disagree. I will watch this again before I watch Morbius again, and that's because I feel like Madam Web, it has a story that, I just feel like there's something there that if it were in the right hands, Madam Web could have been a great movie, but it still wasn't a great movie. So now let me get into what I liked and what I didn't like about this movie. However, I feel like I really can't talk about this movie without getting into some of the spoilers within this movie. However, I really feel like I can't really tell you what I liked and what I didn't like about this movie without going into detail about this movie. So consider this your spoiler warning, because I really feel like I have to go into this movie detail to detail in order for me to really articulate how I feel about this movie, and in order for you to know if this is a journey that you really want to take. So again, there's my spoiler warning, and if you at some point, if you feel like you want to drop off and go see the movie and come make your own opinion, that's totally fine. But given all the hate that this movie is getting and all the criticism this movie is getting, I doubt that you really care. So in the year 1973, in the jungle, we meet Cassandra Webb's mother, who is pregnant with Cassie Webb, who would eventually becomes Madam Web, and she is searching for a particular spider that gives you spider-like abilities, played by Tahar Rahim, who plays Ezekiel. They find the spider, but he ends up shooting her, talking about, "I need this." But luckily, these spider people, they just come out of nowhere. They're climbing on trees, and they take Cassie's mom, and they're able to save the baby, but her mother dies. Now, keep in mind about these spider people in the jungle. They've all been bitten by the spider. They all got spider-like abilities, and they don't even look normal. They look all tribal and have these things all over them. They look all dirty. But keep in mind of them later on in the movie. Flash forward to 2003, we meet Cassie Webb. She is a paramedic. Her partner is Ben Parker, played by Adam Scott, and he's also helping his sister-in-law, Mary Parker, who is very pregnant with Peter Parker, but they don't exactly say the baby's name, that it is Peter Parker, because rights, even though Sony has the rights to Peter Parker, and I don't understand how they can't say the name of a character that they own, but hey, whatever. But anyways, Cassie Webb, she's a bit of a loner. She's a bit to herself. She is a cat lady. But then one day she gets in an accident where she falls into the water, and that's when her Madam Web-like powers manifest, and she starts having these premonitions about things that'll happen, including her co-worker, played by Mike Epps, in which he gets in a car accident and dies. She tries to stop him, but he goes on, and he does get killed in a car accident. And so she looks further into these premonitions, in which she has premonitions about these 3 girls, played by Sydney Sweeney, Isabella Merced, and Celeste O'Connor, who would all eventually become Spider Women, and they will kill Tahar Rahim, who is still alive and well, and he also has premonitions about these 3 girls going to kill him later. And so he spends his whole life trying to find them and kill them. Eventually he does, but Madam Web, she gets to him first, and so the rest of the movie is basically just her trying to connect with the girls and being a mother, sister-like figure to these girls and protecting them before Ezekiel does. Now keep in mind, these teenage girls, every time they are left alone, they end up doing something stupid like run off trail or go into this diner where someone could clearly find them and figure out who they are, and that will lead them to Ezekiel. Now meanwhile, Madam Web, she's figuring out what is going on with her, and then she does eventually go back to those spider people who are no longer looking all tribal and jungle-like. The main leader one, he is now wearing a button-up and pants and just looks like a normal person, but whatever. Anyways, so she does meet him, and she finds out that the reason her mother was looking for that spider person is just to kill some disease that Cassie had while she was still in the mother's womb. So essentially, her mother was trying to save Cassie. So Cassie, she eventually goes back to the States. Bill does find the three girls who are with Ben Parker, and Mary Parker, her water breaks. She's about to give birth, and Cassie, she meets up with them. They defeat Ezekiel. A final battle happens, and now Cassie, she dons her classic Madam Web look. She has the glasses, she's blind, and she's in a wheelchair, and then she ends up teaching and looking after these girls until they become spider people, and yeah. And of course, Mary Parker's baby is born, and Uncle Ben is really excited. In fact, one of the girls say that Uncle Ben, he's really excited about being an uncle. All fun, but no responsibility, to which, hey, I understand being an uncle myself. But then Cassie, she makes this comment saying that's what he thinks. And that's the movie. Now, I try to go into a movie with an open mind, and I was hoping for this movie to be good, but it just wasn't. And making a movie centered around a Spider-Man character that is really not that popular to begin with was just a bad idea. I only know about Madam Web from the Spider-Man cartoon from the 90s. That is about as far as my knowledge of that character goes. And like I said, Sony's handling of these Spider-Man spin-offs has just been piss poor. And I knew right from the beginning, once I heard the dialogue, that this movie is just not going to be good. The dialogue in this movie is horrible. Cassie's arc in the film just didn't feel earned. Neither did any of the arcs in the other films. Now, Dakota Johnson, she can be good in things, but she just wasn't good here. And it's totally not her fault because she can only do for so much with the material she was given. And it's even more clear because with all the interviews about how she clearly doesn't care about this movie, and I even heard just recently that after that first trailer drop, she fired her agent. Now, it's never funny when someone loses a job, but in this situation, it kind of is. The three girls, Sydney Sweeney, Celeste O'Connor, and Isabella Merced, they're almost an afterthought. They were given nothing. You really only see them in the Spider-Woman suits, but like less than 5 minutes. Sydney Sweeney, I know she can be good, but she just wasn't good here. And y'all know what y'all was doing when y'all putting her in the skimpy outfits. Isabella Merced, she's just kind of an afterthought. She was just in the background. She really didn't have no defining personality other than the more level-headed one. Celeste O'Connor, she's the more standoffish one. She's the more strong-willed one that doesn't follow rules. I already told you about Mike Epps and how little he was in this movie. Adam Scott, I will give him credit. He was a good Ben Parker. Like, he was one of the few things in this movie that was charismatic. But like I said, in everything between him and Mary Parker, played by Emma Roberts, I just feel like this is basically Sony's way of trying to connect people to Spider-Man. Like, see, hey, you see, we got all these Spider-Man references in here. You know you like this shit, right? And it's like, no. And there's a chance that this movie is possibly a prequel to this Tom Holland Spider-Man, because you gotta think this movie takes place in 2003, and by the time we meet Tom Holland, when he's already Spider-Man, he's already a teenager in high school, so I could assume that Tom Holland Spider-Man, he was born around this time, and by the time we meet him, he's in high school, so I don't know. There's even a reference to Uncle Ben meeting Aunt May by saying, hey, I met somebody. And then Mary Parker saying the reason Richard Parker is not there is because he's on an important business trip. Now, I will say that some people are saying that this movie is basically a throwback to like that mid-2000s period where we were getting horrible comic book movies, which I get. This movie is kind of a throwback, but at the same time, there's a reason why we stopped doing that, because it just wasn't working. And one more Easter egg in this movie is the one about responsibility. With great power comes responsibility. They do yet another variation of this by saying, once you take on the responsibility, you'll have all the power. I'm like, shut the fuck up. And I didn't expect Madam Web to make me feel old with all the 2003 references, in which there's a billboard of Beyonce's first album, Crazy in Love. You get Cassie Webb saying she's trying to get home so she can catch the next episode of Idol, which I guess referencing American Idol. There's a point in the movie where they're at the diner and they're playing Toxic by Britney Spears. They make a reference to Martha Stewart saying how they feel sorry for her because around this time she was getting ready to go to jail. And there's even a 2000s reference that don't even make sense because it didn't even come out until much, much later. There is a random person on the train playing a PSP. Now, again, this movie takes place in 2003, but a PSP didn't come out until 2006. But hey, you know, Sony, they just gotta show off their products. Look, in the end, I don't think this movie is the worst movie I've ever seen, and like I said, I will still watch this movie before I watch Morbius again. But again, that's just the best compliment I can give this movie. And the reason I prefer this movie over Morbius is because I feel like in better hands, this could have been a good movie. I feel like in an alternate reality, Sony actually cared about the Spider-Man movies they were making, and we actually got a competent movie about Madam Web and the characters surrounding her. But because I live in this reality, this is the movie we got, and it is horrible. Personally, I try to stay away from negativity within my movie reviews or any video I do, because at the end of the day, these are hardworking people that's just coming together to make a good movie or possibly make a good movie. So I don't blame all the actors and production crew on this movie for turning this out. But I still gotta hold the studio accountable, and this is by far one of the worst movies I've seen this year, and we're only 2 months deep. I'm gonna give Madam Web the angry face emoji.